I'm Vinod Sharma. I'm Senior Professor of Disaster Management, and today we will discuss one very important topic, that is urban risk reduction. First of all, urbanization. I think this phenomena is known to you since it goes when civilization started. It may be Indus Valley, it may be Babylonian civilization, it may be Egyptian civilization. Cities were formed, and these cities were near rivers. The basic reason was water, because water is life, and water is required for each and everything, for agriculture, for our urbanization, for drinking purpose, for everything we need water. So that's why this was one reason. And second thing was trade, that mostly the trade was depending by rivers. So that's why most of the big cities in the world, they are near river. Friends, today because the population in urban areas increasing, let me give you a figure that in 2000, the population, world population in urban areas, it was just 50%. But today it is 2020, and more than 65% population is already in urban areas. And we expect that by 2030, I think 75% population will be in urban areas. And this is the issue, that when this kind of population will be in urban areas, then the risk will be more. And because if you take example of South Asia, I think the population density of our cities, it is very high, and that's why the risk is more. Some of the countries, where, for example, Singapore, it is 100% urbanized. England, 99% urbanized. And in case there are some rural areas, it is having almost same facilities. But in developing countries like India, we have this issue. And this is the reason that people are migrating towards urban areas. And today you have so many cities which are 20 million plus. Otherwise, in 2000, there were hardly any city. We were saying Mumbai as one example of this. But today we have all metropolitan cities, and there are number of cities which are in 10 million plus or 15 million plus or 20 million plus population. And that's why the risk is increasing. We will go back to the definition of risk which we discussed earlier. Actually, risk is related with hazard and vulnerability. So in case the hazard, we will have to identify what are the hazards in cities. So one is, of course, flooding, which is very common, which is there in every city. Every year, flash floods is very common phenomena, and this we will discuss in detail, because most of the economic loss in cities is happening because of floods. There are, and the vulnerability. Vulnerability, I told you, the population, the urban planning, because we plan for n number of population, and every year some more population is added, and that's why all this planning failed. Every city, it is not capital. You take example of Mumbai, you take example of Calcutta, you have unauthorized colonies, and these unauthorized colony, they don't have that facilities which are required, and that's why they are more at risk. There is one more important risk which we should discuss, and we will be discussing with you in this session, that is seismic risk. And we are observing, this is the month of June 2020, in last 2 months, there are about 12 earthquakes near Delhi, in the capital and nearby area. Though they were very small, the magnitude was not very high, but 12 earthquake in 2 months' time, the frequency is more. And seismologists are saying that there is a possibility that there may be a bigger earthquake in future. So I think we should be very careful and we should plan for it in case, because we have witnessed, we have seen so many cities, which were affected by earthquake in the past. We have seen, 91 Uttarkashi. We have seen 2001 Gujarat, where Ahmedabad and all big cities, of Gujarat were affected. We have seen in 2011, Sikkim was affected. 2015, we have seen Kathmandu was affected. Many examples. And we can see the economic loss, life loss because of the earthquake is very high. And that's why we should be prepared for earthquake. We should understand this about the vulnerability of the city, how many houses are weak house, how much shelter will be required in case there is a bigger earthquake, how much food material will be required. In case there is earthquake in situation like today, when you are facing corona and when you are facing that, I think then it is a complex disaster and we should be prepared for that. So I think hazard is very important, identifying hazards. It may be, epidemic, which is very important hazard, and we know that in last few decades, country faced many epidemics. We had dengue, we had chikungunya, we had even plague in Surat, we had many things, which affected life in the cities. And today it is corona, which is world, I think, most damaging, disaster. In the history of epidemic, I think this is the worst. And because we were not prepared, nobody was prepared actually. No city was prepared. And that's why we should plan, we should discuss that in case this kind of thing happen in the cities, what should be done. Now, as I was discussing, that people used to migrate to the cities, and that's why the population increase is there. And in this kind of epidemic, they want to go back to their houses, to their villages. And otherwise, villages are not affected by this kind of disaster. But when these people go back to their village and to their place, then they also become vulnerable. So this is one important thing. So friends, we will have to study this hazard, the frequency of hazard, the magnitude of hazard, and how much it will affect us, in case it happens. So I think this kind of simulation things should be done. And the preparedness for cities will be altogether different, because here you have educated people and the awareness will be different, the capacity building will be altogether different, and we will discuss this in detail, that how these cities can be resilient, taking some best practices, from our own country. We will discuss that how the urban areas can become disaster resilient. I think this is the aim of disaster management, that all cities, all urban areas, villages, in fact the whole country should be disaster resilient. There is one more hazard in the urban areas, that is the chemical, biological and nuclear, and we should be prepared for that. There is one example of Bhopal gas tragedy, which has happened in 1884, and in that tragedy, I think the entire city was affected, and the population is still facing the brunt of that. Recently, in 2020, we had 2 chemical disasters, and whenever there is chemical gas leak, wherever there is more population, that is affected basically. Biological disaster, I think the best example is corona, and as I told you that this is the worst disaster ever happened, in the world, and the whole world is suffering because of corona. And we will be discussing some of the best practices that some of the countries which has come out from this disaster and what they have done. India has also done some remarkable job. For example, Surat is one example where the city administration, the communities, they did marvelous job. Even after Mumbai floods, the role of community was remarkable, and that's why we will, in urban risk, we will discuss both the things, some of the best practices, some of the worst practices of this country and outside. And basically the goal is, when we are studying disaster management, when we are studying any risk, the most critical, crucial thing is that how to make it resilient, how to make urban areas more resilient. So this will be the aim of our this session, and we will discuss all details with you. Thank you.